In the summer of 1831, the quiet fields of Southampton County, Virginia, would drown in blood. Led by an enslaved preacher named Nat Turner, a man who believed he was chosen by God, one of the most terrifying uprisings in American history erupted. For 2 days and nights, Turner and his followers moved silently through the plantations, killing without mercy, striking fear into the heart of the South. To some, he was a prophet fulfilling divine justice. To others, a murderer who shattered the fragile illusion of control. What began as a vision of freedom became a nightmare that haunted generations. This is the story of faith twisted by oppression, of vengeance born from centuries of chains. The rebellion of Nat Turner would shake the foundations of slavery, provoke brutal retaliation, and force America to confront a question it still fears to answer. How far will the oppressed go when hope dies? Nat Turner was born into bondage on October 2nd, 1800, in the slaveholding county of Southampton, Virginia, a world built on human misery. From his earliest days, he was marked as different. Those who knew him whispered that he possessed a strange light in his eyes, a quiet intensity beyond his years. While other children learned only the weight of chains, Nat learned to read, a dangerous gift in the South, where literacy among the enslaved was seen as rebellion in itself. The Bible became his refuge, his only book, his only friend. Its words burned into his soul, filling him with visions of deliverance and divine destiny. He saw himself as chosen, set apart, a Moses among slaves. Yet around him, the world was merciless. Families torn apart on the auction block, mothers screaming as their children were sold, and men beaten to death under the lash. Each atrocity left a scar upon his mind and a question in his heart. How could such evil exist if God was just? As he grew older, Nat's reputation as a preacher spread across plantations. He was quiet, reserved, yet when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of thunder. He told his people to believe, to endure, to wait for a sign. The masters saw only a docile man of God. They did not see the storm building behind his eyes. Every prayer whispered in the fields, every verse of freedom spoken in secret, was fuel for something greater. The enslaved called him the prophet. In his dreams, he saw visions, blood on the cornfields, fire in the heavens, and chains breaking in the darkness. These visions would soon consume him. The man born into slavery was becoming something far more dangerous, a believer with nothing left to lose and a God he thought demanded vengeance. It was the night of August 21st, 1831. The humid Virginia air was thick and silent, the moon veiled behind clouds, as if the heavens themselves looked away. In the cabin of Joseph Travis, Nat Turner and his small band of followers gathered, trembling not with fear, but with a grim sense of destiny. For months they had planned in whispers and secrecy, sharpening hatchets, forging crude blades, and binding themselves to a single oath. No mercy, no retreat. Turner's voice was calm as he prayed one final time, his words echoing in the flickering light of a single candle. The time has come, he said. Then they struck. The first victims were the Travis family, slaughtered in their sleep. No cries for help reached the dawn, only the sound of vengeance awakening. Moving from house to house, plantation to plantation, Turner's men killed every white person they encountered, men, women, even children, believing they were instruments of divine judgment. Within hours, the rebellion spread like wildfire. Enslaved men joined their ranks, armed with axes, clubs, and whatever they could find. By midday, the ground ran red with the blood of the oppressors. Panic swept across Southampton County. Bells rang, horses thundered, and word spread that Nat Turner's army was marching. For nearly 48 hours, they moved without rest, guided by faith and fury. By the time the uprising was crushed, 55 white people lay dead, and the South trembled in horror. Turner, once the quiet preacher, had become a symbol of divine wrath, an avenging spirit born of centuries of suffering. But even as the rebellion faltered and his followers were hunted down, Nat Turner felt no regret. He believed the prophecy was fulfilled, the fire had been lit, and it would never be extinguished. Terror consumed the South like a fever. News of Nat Turner's rebellion spread faster than any rider could gallop. Rumors twisted the truth. Some claimed thousands of enslaved people were rising, marching toward Richmond, burning everything in their path. White militias armed themselves and rode out in blind panic. What followed was not justice, but vengeance unchained. They hunted anyone with dark skin, slave or free, guilty or innocent. Men were shot on sight, women whipped until their backs split open, children dragged from homes and lynched from trees. The rebellion had lasted only 2 days, yet the punishment would last for weeks. Nearly 200 black people were slaughtered in retaliation, their bodies left hanging as warnings along the roads of Virginia. Turner's name became a curse whispered in fear, a ghost haunting the white imagination. In newspapers, slave owners spoke of monsters and demons, painting Turner as the devil himself, a sign that slavery must be tightened, controlled with an iron fist. Across the South, new laws were passed overnight. No slave could read, no gathering could take place without white supervision, no preacher could speak without permission. The Bible that once gave hope now became forbidden fruit. For the enslaved, the world grew darker still, the chains heavier than before. But beneath the terror, something else stirred, a secret pride. For the first time, the masters had felt fear. They had seen what could happen when the oppressed refused to bow. Turner's rebellion had failed to free the enslaved, but it shattered the illusion of peace. It reminded America that a people can be bound, beaten, and silenced, but never forever. Nat Turner's trial began and ended within a single day. On November 5, 1831, he was brought before the Southampton County Court, thin, barefoot, and unbowed. The room was filled with white faces, their eyes burning with a mix of fear and vengeance. He stood silently as the charges were read: conspiracy, insurrection, and murder. When asked if he had anything to say in his defense, Turner spoke softly, declaring that he was guided by the Spirit of God. His words sent a chill through the courtroom. There was no madness in his tone, only calm certainty, as if he had already accepted his fate. The verdict was swift, guilty on all counts. The sentence, death by hanging. On the morning of November 11th, Turner was led through the streets of Jerusalem, Virginia, in chains. Crowds gathered to see the man who had defied the entire South. Some cursed him, others stared in silence. As he mounted the gallows, a priest urged him to repent, but Turner's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. He whispered a prayer, perhaps for his people, perhaps for his soul. The trapdoor fell, and the prophet swung lifeless in the cold morning air. But death did not end the hatred. His body was mutilated, skinned, beheaded, and dismembered. His remains were scattered, his skull passed around as a trophy, his skin turned into macabre relics. The white South wanted to erase him, to make sure his spirit would never rise again. Yet even as they tried to destroy his memory, they could not destroy what he represented. The rebellion had been drowned in blood, but its echo, his name, his defiance, would haunt America for generations, a reminder that faith and fury, once awakened, can never truly be hanged. In the aftermath of Nat Turner's execution, the South tightened its grip in terror. Legislators across Virginia met in emergency sessions, not to ask why men like Turner rebelled, but how to ensure it could never happen again. The answer was fear. New laws were passed that banned teaching enslaved people to read or write. Black churches were outlawed. Even prayer required white supervision. Patrols roamed the countryside, watching, listening, punishing at the slightest sign of defiance. What Turner began with 70 men in 2 days now reshaped the entire Southern system. His rebellion had terrified the slaveholding world, revealing its greatest truth, that slavery was not stability, but an endless war against the human spirit. And yet, beyond the terror, his story became something more. Among abolitionists in the North, Turner's name became a rallying cry, a dark, holy spark in the fight for freedom. Writers, preachers, and activists spoke of him as both martyr and warning, proof that no man would remain enslaved forever. To some, he was a prophet driven by divine justice. To others, a murderer haunted by blood. But history could not decide, because Nat Turner had become myth. His uprising inspired future generations, from the fiery words of Frederick Douglass to the silent courage of those who fled north through the Underground Railroad. Turner's rebellion forced America to stare into the mirror of its own cruelty. The fear he ignited lived on, not in the sound of the axe, but in the whisper that freedom, once imagined, can never be forgotten. And in that truth, Nat Turner's prophecy endures, unbroken, unrepentant, eternal. Nearly 2 centuries have passed since Nat Turner's rebellion, yet its shadow still lingers across the American South. The fields of Southampton County have long grown quiet, but the soil remembers. The same ground that once drank blood now bears witness to history's buried screams. In the years after the uprising, Turner's story was twisted, silenced, or told through the mouths of those who feared him most. For generations, textbooks painted him as a madman, a butcher, a fanatic blinded by delusion. But in time, a new telling emerged, one that saw not insanity, but a man driven to the edge by a world that refused to see his humanity. Turner's rebellion forced America to confront its own moral hypocrisy, a nation built on liberty that thrived on bondage. The fear he inspired became the language of control. The courage he embodied became the language of freedom. Today, scholars, artists, and activists revisit his name not as legend, but as warning. His story asks an unending question. What happens when faith meets injustice, when patience breaks, when silence turns to fire? Nat Turner's rebellion did not end with his death. It continued in every movement that dared to challenge oppression, from abolition to civil rights and beyond. His life remains both a wound and a revelation, a testament to the unbearable price of dignity denied. In the echoes of 1831, one truth resounds. The oppressed may be chained, but their dreams of freedom will always rise again. Just as Nat Turner once rose, believing he was carrying out the will of heaven.